Hello, this is Louis again, Louis Almeida, the leader, teacher, and student of Spinoza and Goethe philosophy and works. Now, we talked about in part two of our videos a tutorial of how to understand Spinoza, because Spinoza is very difficult to comprehend. As I mentioned, many of my students have tried to study Spinoza on their own, and it's quite difficult and very taxing to the mind. We're not used to putting that kind of an effort, and that's why I can guide you if you're interested. And this is what I want to reflect on what we studied last week regarding Spinoza's idea of coming to a new character. And he described it as coming to the knowledge, or that knowledge is, say, information, but what kind of that information? It's to know oneself. You heard of Socrates, and they associate Socrates with the idea of the most important knowledge is to know thyself. What is there to know? And this is where I know through my own experience. I had a teacher for over 20 years and another 20 years to help me understand Spinoza to be able to communicate these ideas with you. And what we need to do is to understand Spinoza is learn what it means to awaken the mind, because there is a natural tendency in all of us to apply ourselves to the material that we would desire to understand, but that material might be too difficult, and so we give up. And we might complain about the language. 17th century teacher, philosopher Spinoza spoke in a way that is a little different from the 21st century. However, the ideas are there. We must, however, apply ourselves to learn how to apply our mind to strengthen it to understand Spinoza. I mean, Spinoza was influenced many philosophers, and there was a quote saying that a true philosopher isn't a philosopher until he applies himself to understand Spinoza's philosophy. All right. So from the idea of coming to the knowledge, that knowledge is to know thyself. What is there to know? To know our emotions. And the emotions are going to be a key for your growth. What do I mean by that? The emotions, say, if we have desire, desire is we want something. We want something to happen. We're attracted to someone, and we want that someone to love us in return because we're so infatuated. We feel this love. We want that person to love us in return, or we want a better job, or want to go to school, or want to go to a new restaurant. So we have desire. Say I have a desire to go to a Mexican restaurant, and I order um, chili rellenos, chili rellenos. My mother's my favorite because my mother made the type of chili rellenos that I dearly love. And I found this place that came very close, and I was looking forward to this lunch. However, there was a different cook, and I had the chili relleno, and it wasn't the same, and I was disappointed. That's what I'm talking about. When your desires are not met, you are going to be disappointed. And when disappointed comes up, you'll feel pain. And that is an emotion. So we have desire, something we want, and we have pain because our desires are not met. Now, there are other emotions that we'll get into in time, but those two right now, I just want to emphasize. And when I also work with my students, we talk about uh, journaling. To journal the event that triggered your emotion of pain and desire. So when our desires are not met, we automatically go into pain. But what is it? What do I mean by a journal? Just like a diary. Uh, Again, I think more the feminine nature, women, young girls, had a diary, a journal. So I recommend do the same. Have a journal, but not just to write anything. Write specifically the event that triggered your pain because your desires was not actualized, not did not happen. All right, so let's go back to Spinoza, the ethics. And again, Spinoza's idea was coming to a new character, the knowledge of the union. And now, this knowledge, and we begin to understand our emotions, this triggers the mind to be stimulated to think clearly, more clearly, adequately, to understand what an emotion is, the definition, and to be clearly understand. When you apply your mind to understand, this strengthens you. Now you're able to say, apply yourself a little bit deeper. We're not used to look at ourselves. We're always in a busy to do, and accomplish. Get good grades, get a good salary, get an education. We're rushing, go, find a mate, procreate, have children, and the story. However, it doesn't end exactly how we like it. We still feel frustrated, unfulfilled, unloved, lonely, and sad, and sometimes depressed. However, we can overcome those states. We begin to acknowledge that we have what is called a true intelligence, which is different from the ego intellect. Now, what is the ego intellect? The ego intellect, basically, we all have an ego, and it's important that we do have an ego, because without an ego, we could not survive. Our first birth is the ego, even though Alan Watts says the ego is not real, it's not true, it doesn't exist. And he's right to a certain degree. However, the ego is an illusion of the self. It's a false self, but it's so important because the ego is comprised of confused ideas. And it's only when we are in an emotional state that we realize that we are in a confused state. So to gain the knowledge of these emotions, begin to strengthen the mind, and we're able to see ourselves. And that's why Spinoza says to come to the knowledge of the union existing between my mind and the whole of nature. Now, Spinoza's God is different from the Christian God. And Spinoza was called an atheist. His books were banned. And his ethics was rediscovered 200 years after his death. Now, I've studied Spinoza for the last, say, over 50 years. But it's taken me to the last 20 years to really go deeply where I could understand him. I understand his ethics, I would say at least 80%. There's still a lot I don't comprehend. I'm working on it. But I want you to begin to have this sensitivity that is possible for you to understand. See, I was a high school dropout. I could not compete. My mind was very weak. I couldn't focus. And so I dropped out of high school, 10th grade. And I found my mind through my teacher, because one of the things my teacher told me, that if you really want to understand Spinoza and be involved in this group that he was leading, the Spinoza group, and this is during 1970, when I met my teacher. He said, if you want to remain in this work, you're going to have to work and discover your mind. And I did. And I discovered my mind. I want you to discover your mind and your emotions. Intellectuals will not be interested in this because they think they know it all. But if you are not satisfied with your life and you're not fulfilled and you don't feel the self-love, then follow me, because I experienced this, believe it or not. Now, again, on page 6, come to the knowledge of the union existing between the mind and the whole of nature. And what is this nature? Spinoza's God. But we're not going to go there yet, because we want to know yourself first, to know thyself. Now, we're going to jump over from page 6 over to page 8. Now, this is where it's more difficult, but I'm going to give you kind of an overview. Now, on page 8, he begins like this. Having laid down these preliminary rules, I will betake myself to the first and most important task, namely the amendment of the understanding and the rendering it capable of understanding things in a manner necessary for attaining our end. Now you might say, well, what is he saying? What is he talking about? So you have an advantage. You can take this video and go over these ideas over and over until it begins to click. It begins to make sense. I'm going to go over it with you again. So Spinoza is saying, and now on page 8, he's beginning to give his method of how to increase the power of the mind to understand oneself and understand the whole of nature. He says, so the first thing he says, so there are 4 levels of perception, and he wants to use the best. But he describes each one that he's familiar with. And so he begins with, I want to plan out, say, create some rules that I can follow. And I will take upon myself the first and most important task, namely the amendment of the understanding. So Spinoza this part of the ethic is called on the improvement of the understanding. So what does that mean? It means that Spinoza realizes that he had to improve his thinking. He cannot just rely on memory and gathering factual information. But to improve his understanding is to say, I know what I read and study, I understand. Just like you know that 4 times 4 is 16. I know that is true. Or that 2 lines parallel to a third, I know that's true. Or 2 lines are parallel to a third or parallel to one another. So the mind knows that it knows. So Spinoza says, I want to amend or add to the understanding and making it possible or rendering it capable of understanding things in the manner necessary for attaining our end. What is the end? Coming to the knowledge of the union existing between the mind and the whole of nature. It's a whole process. I've been doing this work for over 50 years, and I continue the process of improving my mind, improving my understanding, because that is where fulfillment, self-love, and self-approval reside. All right, so the next new paragraph begins. In order to bring this about, the natural order demands that I should here recapitulate. What does that mean? To review all the modes of perception, all the different ways of how we perceive or see, perception, sight, all the modes of perception which I have hitherto employed for affirming or denying anything with certainty, so that I may choose the best and at the same time begin to know my own powers and the nature I wish to perfect. And here Spinoza says, he wants to improve himself. He wants to perfect himself. What it means by perfect, perfection to Spinoza is reality. Perfection and reality are synonymous, meaning when you are perfect, you're able to be in reality, face reality. So pain is a sense that we're not facing reality. We are in a state of less perfection. All right. So being in reality, what is reality? Being able to see what is really happening. When you're in a problem that you're not able to face, or you feel rejected, or you feel your computer is malfunctioning, or your car is not working, you're in a state of less perfection, not knowing how to deal with the problem for that moment. So the idea is to strengthen your mind to learn how to deal with problems. And that is going to be part of your growth work. But to understand your nature is more difficult, and the nature of others is much more difficult. So there are 4 levels of perception that helps us see reality. Again, reflection. Pardon me, I need a drink of water. I'm getting thirsty. My mouth is getting dry. Okay. First, reflection shows that all the modes or the ways of perception or knowledge may be reduced to 4. Again, reflection shows that all the modes of perception or knowledge may reduce to 4. 1, perception arising from hearsay or from some sign which everyone may name as he pleases. So perception arising from hearsay. So you hear information. As children, we're so impressed, we're impressed upon, We rely on the environment. Our education is our parents or guardians or wherever we grew up in. So our siblings, our older siblings, are the source of information, our education, the schools. So when we're children, we're endeavoring to learn how to walk, how to talk, and how to take care of ourselves. So hearsay is you're gathering information. And a lot of that information is erroneous, partial, confused, and you're going to follow it. That's where prejudice, hate is learned as children. And the way you look at yourself. If someone constantly says you're stupid, you're not worth anything, that's hearsay information, and you believe it. Oh, if someone says your parents says, oh, you're wonderful, you're handsome, or you're beautiful, and school is going to be so easy, you're going to be so smart, that's hearsay information. All right. The next one is perception arising from mere experience. That is from experience not yet classified by the mind or the intellect. And only so because the event, but the given event happens to take place and we have no contrary fact to set against it. So we don't, this perception from mere experiences, meaning that you don't really understand the experience, but you follow it. For instance, you go to a store and your mother, you're in the car, you're in the car and your mom is driving and she starts swearing and talking about a certain class of people and saying, oh, breath. It's not realizing that you're taking all this information. And so she says, oh, these minorities, they don't belong here. They should go back to Mexico. And so now you have this automatic experience. Oh, minorities are bad. Okay, so that's experience. Or you might read. So for instance, I was put in the low reading class in grade school. And that was my experience. I believe I was a poor reader. And so that was experience. And I heard it. Hearsay and mere experience. So that is a source of information that we believe and we follow. Perception number 3. Perception arising when the essence of one thing is inferred from another thing. Now that is more difficult to comprehend. Look at this. Perception arising when the essence. Now Spinoza's idea of essence is an idea of something, or the idea of the object, the essence of an object, the nature of the object. So nature, idea, and essence are synonymous to Spinoza. So I can word it a different way. Perception arising from the idea of one thing is inferred from another thing. Well, what is he talking about? I'll give you an example. If you take a phone, and this is an old phone, an iPhone, Apple, it's about 8 years old, small, has a limited capability, and then you have another smartphone and much more sophisticated. However, this phone was, say, derived from another phone, and this is more powerful. But it gathered, but so had an idea of a phone previously and increased its ideas, gathered more information, and so an idea is inferred from another thing or from another idea. See, that might be more difficult to comprehend, but in time you'll get it. Now, the 4th level of perception, he says, lastly, there is a perception arising when a thing is perceived solely through its essence or through the knowledge of its proximate cause. Now, that's all I want to say, because these, again, the first 2 are easier, no question. They're easier. However, you must listen to these ideas over and over again, and that's the advantage of being a student. Hopefully, you can take this, and some of you students who are my former students may want to listen to this over and over again, because you're coming so close to understand it. Because the more you understand it, the more reality you are in, and the more power are you able to deal with problems. So, for instance, a good example, hearsay and experience. You believe, and this is all belief, that you have free will. And Spinoza explains very clearly that we don't. that we follow the law of necessity and the law of self-preservation, and the law of inertia and the law of cause and effect. These four laws are the major causes of directs all living things, all animals and human nature. It directs, for instance, you have desire. You are aware of your desire, and you follow your desires. And some of your desires can be a problem if they become too excessive for alcohol, sex, uh, gaining material things, being a hoarder of money, hoarder of things. And so this is necessary, that we are attracted to things that we believe are good for us, and that is desire. But Spinoza says we're not aware, we're not conscious of the causes of these desires and how these desires originated and how they direct our life. So we're aware of our desires and our reactions. But the idea of free will is an illusion. And we believe it because we see, that's sight. We have experiences, and we heard over and over since you were born, you believe in free will. And this is all belief. But don't worry, you don't have to take this literally, but just hear it. And possibly in time you may understand it. Because when you see someone do something that you disapprove of, automatically you'll go into hate. And what's the definition of hate? Hate is pain accompanied with the person as the cause of my pain. And that is, again, that's the second emotion that I want you to begin to become aware of. The first two is desire, and then pain, and then hate. Hate happens when our desires we believe the thing is the cause of our pain. I know you believe that hate is a bad thing. Religiously, we're told nobody should hate. Hate is bad. And so, in all these gurus, all these so-called mystics, there are a lot of very good mystics, excellent, and they give us a lot of wisdom, but they do not change human nature. You can go into a great state of meditation, wonderful, and feel God's presence, wonderful. However, when you're in life, your desires take over. Osho was a good example. He had women follow him all over him, and sex with him, sex is part of nirvana and godly state of being. And he had 100 Rolls Royces, amazing. And so he was caught up in the ego-intellect. And there are many so-called spiritual egoists. All right, Spinoza will help us come to truth and clarity, but take time. And I'm going to end this meeting, this video, because we're over 20 minutes, and that's maximum. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.